I'm really pleased to welcome a good friend and business associate of mine, Roderic Yapp, to the Dynamy Career Conversations. So this is a series of conversations I'm having with people who are experts in the field of creating a career you love. And I wanted to invite you on, Rod, because you've had a couple of really interesting career transitions, which I think could be really interesting and potentially inspirational for some of the people that subscribe to my blog. So just by way of background, you and I know each other because we did our coaching training together and have run a few leadership development programs together. So I would certainly count you as a friend now. Yeah. So I'm really pleased to have you on. And I suppose it'd be really interesting for people to hear a little bit about your background around your first transition, Rod, which of course was out of the Royal Marines.
Yeah, that's right. So I joined the Royal Marines in 2005. I served for 7 years. I was a commissioned officer. I had a fantastic time leading people all over the world into the challenging situations and environments. And then around sort of 2012, I was sort of looking forward and thinking about what my career would look like. And in 2012, you know, I knew we were going to be pulling out of Afghanistan in 2014. And I sort of felt that the experience I had behind me was really operational, but I didn't feel that going forward, the military would be the same. And when you look sort of over the course of kind of history, you know, the military goes in sort of cycles of being very heavily used and then being sort of left alone to be fallow for a period of time. And I just didn't want to take my career through that fallow period. So I think my view is always, you know, if you're really enjoying it, but you think the future is going to change and is not be something that you want to be a part of, then it's probably about the time to leave. And so in 2012, aged 30, I made the decision to leave the Corps. The career ahead of me, as I said, wasn't as appealing as the sort of stuff I'd done. Equally, you know, I always had this model, which was either stay in and become a general and get a pension, if you could get to that high rank, or leave early before you're sort of too institutionalized by the organization. And so for me, it was that sort of second decision point where things were sort of coming into focus. Mm-hmm. I got some really good advice from a number of people when I left, which was the way the sort of job market works is that, you know, opportunities are filled through networking. If an organization has to go out to a recruitment process, that means that they have exhausted their networks first, and they are likely to be, they are putting it out almost like to tender, because they don't really have anyone that they would sort of like to go with, anyone sort of close to them. And if 90% of opportunities come through networking, you should spend 90% of your time networking. And that was obviously a kind of a massive thing for me. Equally, I got some really good feedback from the CEO of Control Risks, which, to put it into context, is a bit like saying, I'd like to join the Foreign Office and then someone introducing you to the Foreign Secretary. It's just so far beyond the level you should be meeting. And he said to me, he said, look, you'll always have your experience in the Corps, you'll always be a former Royal Marines officer, but you're much, much more interesting to me if you go and do something really different. If you go and do something where you have to run a P&L, or if you go and do something in a totally different industry, because it's that sort of it's that totally new environment that's going to create such a rich learning opportunity for you. And so I went and worked for a company called Urenco. Again, I got the job because I was networking, was introduced to the CEO or the managing director, Simon Bowen, went along to have a conversation with him. He pretty much interviewed me, and then I was offered an opportunity to go and work in the nuclear industry for a couple of years, and it was brilliant. It was an absolutely cracking place to go and work and learn. You know, based in the Northwest, highly unionized, highly regulated, totally new sort of safety culture to get my head around, and it was a great place to go and learn.
Great. So you're speaking my language there, talking about the networking. That's what I tell my clients all the time about, you know, the power of the network and how so many roles are filled in that way, and building your contacts for the future as well. And what were the challenges then of sort of transferring from that military environment into a corporate environment?
So I came out of the military thinking, you know, I'm a pretty good leader. I've led people into sort of challenging environments. And what I failed to grasp was that the military is it's not just the people. There are a series of systems and processes and structures and an incredibly strong organizational culture that sets people up for success. And so when I went out and I started at Urenco, I did the sort of typical thing of, you know, wanting to show willing and enthusiasm. So I sort of signed myself up to sort of deliver lots of projects and programs. And when I would have a meeting with these people to sort of say, where are we with this? They just tell me why they hadn't done it. And I was like, oh no, I've signed up for all this stuff and I'm not going to deliver any of it. And that was a real sort of first moment for me, that the sort of culture of accountability didn't exist like it had in the military. If someone said they were going to do something, they would do it. They would work through the night to make sure it was done. They would never accept giving you, you know, a sort of unfinished product or something that wasn't as good as it could be. And I kind of relied on that. And I relied on, you know, well-trained sergeants and corporals and people beneath me who were there to set me up for success. So there were certain things I didn't even need to worry about. I mean, I didn't really need to worry about discipline with my guys. My sergeants and my corporals tended to take care of that. So there were lots of things that I never really kind of had to deal with. I think the military also has a really strong culture of organizational clarity. So this idea of like, what is it we're trying to achieve as a unit is really clear. And they have this sort of, they use the word intent a lot, which is, you know, this is my intent. This is what I want to achieve. Now you guys use your expertise to work out how to do that. Come up with a training program that is interesting and inventive and exciting and is going to switch the guys on. But I want it to achieve that intent. I want us to be, you know, good at fighting in an urban area. I want us to be, you know, physically fit, not just cardiovascular, but physically strong as well. Go and work out how to deliver that. And I love that. And then the sort of last bit was the kind of people. You always miss the people of the good organizations, right? They were good fun to work with. It was a very binary working lifestyle. So it was either on 100 miles an hour or completely off. And I love that. And I found, you know, over the past 6 months, it's been a lot of the time I felt I'm in third gear because I'm either working on work for a couple of hours, then I'm with the kids, and then I'm back to work. And I find I'm at my best when I can work flat out, be really, you know, I don't mind working hard, but, you know, having those big blocks of time to focus on a problem or a solution, and then spend some time with the children at the end of the day. I'm an on or an off person, and I guess that's come from the military.
And I guess then that sort of leads us a little bit towards your second career transition, which you alluded there to the coaching. And of course, I said at the beginning, that's how you and I met, was doing coaching training. So how did this guy from the military, who then got into the nuclear industry, then decide that was going to be the next step?
So I did do it. So I did a couple of years at Urenco, and then I did a job as a consultant for a while. But it was a consultant, sort of, you know, forecasting prices of minor metals and working in the energy markets. If I'm being really honest, I was rubbish at the job. I was really, really bad at it because it involved sort of, you know, dealing with like massive spreadsheets based on sort of assumptions, and I'm just not. I gave up maths at GCSE grade level B. So I found myself doing a job that I really didn't want to do, which I think teaches you as much about what you like doing, because if you're doing too much of that and you don't like it, then you want to build a career that steers away from that. And I read the book 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and I actually did the obituary exercise where you sort of, you know, write your eulogy from the perspective of 4 people. And I realized that, you know, if you want to be happy in your career, you have to build it around something that you're interested in and that you like doing. And when I thought about my career, and I thought about in particular my service in the Marines, my time at Urenco, what I enjoyed doing most was helping to develop people. And everything really, if I'm being really honest, was sort of secondary to that, making a Marine slightly better or supporting them to become slightly better. So I started to sort of look at the kind of leadership development market. I realized that lots of people in that market were sort of ex-HR or often organizational psychologists. And while I think there's massive value to those approaches, I just felt I could offer sort of something slightly different, a sort of practitioner's perspective, perhaps. And so I decided to do it. I sort of set it up. I had a bit of savings. I knew how long I could kind of live for. And I knew, like, in the back of my head, I had this sort of figure of how much I needed to bring in to sort of cover the mortgage and make sure there was food on the table. And it really was as simple as that. And I think if I'd known all the risks I was going to take, that I probably wouldn't have done it, because I started off, you know, kind of doing what you do when you're in the corporate world. And then you just have that oh shit moment of, unless I start to get some invoices out the door, I'm going to go bust. And I'm going to be part of those statistics of most businesses that fail. And when we did our coaching course, I don't know if you remember this, but I was like remembering, I remember thinking, you know, the majority of coaches don't seem to make any money. You know, they seem to be doing it as a sort of side project or something on the back. And I thought, I know this can't be me. I've got mouths to feed and a mortgage to pay and all these kind of responsibilities. And I think that drove a sort of different way of thinking about it. You know, so for me, it couldn't just be coaching. It had to be sort of workshops, development programs. And it forced me to think differently about what my offering was. And I'm still alive today. So I think I'm probably doing something well.
So that was what, 4.5 years ago, I think we did our training, and you and I both set our businesses up straight away.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. A lot of the people that we trained with probably weren't even looking to start up a business in coaching. They maybe wanted it as a new corporate skill, or just a skill for the future, perhaps. So yeah, I do remember having that moment as well of like, it's not just about going and being a coach, it's about being a business owner and having a proposition.
Exactly that. And I think that, you know, most people focus on like the coaching side of it, right? You know, you get good at being a coach and you sort of build a sort of network of clients, you articulate the value of what it is you bring. And that's 50% of it. There's this whole other area that you got to get good at, which is finding people that want to and are interested in buying coaching from you specifically. And an entire sales cycle that you need to take care of. Because if you're not talking to people regularly, if you're not trying to find people within your target market, that's not going to cause you a problem today. It'll cause you one in 3 months' time. And that's a whole other skill set. You know, you have to enjoy doing that. And you have to be good at it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You'll certainly struggle in the early stages.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And your business now, then, Leadership Forces, the name obviously, you know, implies some of what you've talked about, your background. What is it now, sort of 4 years on? What's the offering that Leadership Forces brings, and what's your USP?
So the offering is, I suppose it's probably best to talk about the kind of the target market or the client. So initially I sort of started out, you know, focusing on venture capital backed scale ups, because I thought if I could get into that market, you know, these were organizations that, you know, were going to be successful in the future. If I could get them to start thinking about leadership and culture at the start, then they wouldn't have to go through an organizational transformation program kind of later on. Mm. And that wasn't very successful. And the reason is because when someone's starting a business right from the outset, they really don't care about the leadership or culture stuff. They just need to get traction. They need to get a target market fit, and they need to be able to sort of build on that. So the proposition has evolved slightly. And I think typically the clients that I work best with are sort of anything from a turnover of about 5 million to about 100 million. Much bigger than that, and they tend to be very corporate and very big and large organizations, unless you can get hold of some discretionary L&D spend, or you can get have a conversation with the decision maker. You end up getting into the sort of L&D world. Learning and development tends to be very much kind of training focused, and training tends to be sort of relatively poorly paid and sort of commoditized. So the sweet spot for me is an organization that's growing, is starting to build out of build a hierarchy. Minimum employees would be about 70 to 100, up to several hundred, starting to build out that management structure and going, do you know what worked around here yesterday or last year isn't working quite as well? Mm. Why is that? You know, maybe we need to start thinking about, you know, developing our managers and our leaders so that they are competent at leading people. and often they learn that because they've made mistakes by promoting really competent people into leadership positions and, subtly reinforcing the mindset of the doer rather than the mindset of the leader. So those are the sort of typical clients that I work best with. And I prefer to do leadership programs because, motivational speeches, they have an impact, but it's really small. My personal preference is to do something more longer term and actually see the change and support the people through that.
And in terms of running your own business, because, sometimes people, it's quite unusual, I think, that people are in a permanent employed role and suddenly think they're going to start their own business. But I do think a lot of people have an inkling that they might want to do that one day as part of their kind of career portfolio. What would you say are the biggest challenges? And off the back of that, what one piece of advice would you give? Do you wish someone had given to you?
So I think there's an enormous amount of work that you can do while you've still got the support of full-time employment. You can start talking to people about, what it is you're thinking about doing. A lot of the sort of planning you can do while you've still got the security of someone paying the salary, because you still on the weekend, on the evenings or the weekends. So I'd sort of try and do as much of that as possible kind of in your spare time, and even sort of try things out. And if you're regularly getting feedback where someone goes, yeah, I'd buy that, I'd pay you to come in and do that, or I would pay for that product, then you know that you're sort of going somewhere. But I suggest until you get to that point, be really cautious about this sort of all-in approach, because my view is that that's really, really dangerous. Lots of people on LinkedIn will talk about you've got to go all in and, something will work itself out. And my response to that is, well, look, my son who's 4 years old can't swim. If I lob him into a swimming pool, he's fully committed, but he's not thought about the risk, or I've not managed the risk and he's going to drown. And that happens to a huge number of organizations. The statistics are really clear on that. In terms of one piece of advice, I'd get some real clarity on what is the problem you solve, and is there someone who's willing to pay for that? Because if the answer is no to that question, it's kind of a nice idea. And is there a market? Are there other people sort of selling this stuff? And how are you different, or how are you better for them than them? There's lots of really good material that you can read on this stuff. I'm a big fan of Daniel Priestley's books, oversubscribed and Key Persons of Influence, especially if you're looking at building your own sort of professional services firm. I think they're a good place to look at. And then, understanding how do you have a consultative selling conversation? If that's what it looks like, what's your sort of structure? There's loads of, the beauty of having the internet is there's loads of this stuff out there that you can go and look at, but go and learn this stuff. Don't just focus on the sort of, if it's coaching, for example, don't just focus on how to do the work. There's a whole other 50%, which is how to build a business. You have to learn that. And you have to be curious and passionate about it. I think you have to be interested in that area as well. I think I've answered your question there. I think
you have. So there was something there about starting it as a side hustle maybe and testing it out, and something about having a market. Really agree with that, because I know sometimes people have a really great idea, or they go, well, I want this thing, therefore everybody else must want it, but without testing out whether there are people, as you say, that will pay for it, and then what are your USPs? So it's been great talking to you. If anybody wants to find out a bit more about you, or follow you, or find out what Leadership Forces is up to, what's the easiest way for people to get in touch?
So Roderic Yapp, LinkedIn is probably the best way. Just drop me a note, say that you sort of heard this here. I will always respond to any questions or any feedback. It may take me a couple of days to do that, but I'll always get back to people. And that's probably the best place to find me.